Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Joining me today is Alicia Planincic, who is an economist with the Business Council of Alberta. Thanks for joining us today, Alicia.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the labor force survey that Statistics Canada just released the other day. When we look at Canada, first of all, the employment was up 154,000 in November compared to the previous month. And it is 186,000 higher than the pre-COVID February 2020 level. Unemployment rate dropped from 6.7% to 6.0%. So tell me what's happening on the Canadian labor market scene. Pretty strong numbers there for the month of November.
Yeah, overall, it was a really encouraging month. In October, the numbers were a little bit underwhelming. So I think it was really good to see a strong month in November. In fact, it well surpassed any of the Economist expectations for this month. We were looking for just maybe around 30,000 more people working in November and saw, as you said, a number of over 150,000. So really encouraging to see those numbers and to see recovery continue. I think that employers have kind of gotten into the space of being used to the vaccine passports and the restrictions that are in place, with not really any new measures put into place between October and November.
Now, when we look specifically at Alberta, employment was up by 15,400 month over month. The unemployment rate remained unchanged at 7.6%. But employment is up 105,400 from a year ago. So what's happening here in the province?
Yeah, so also a good month for Alberta. I think with, as you say, jobs up or 15,000 more people employed. So that's just less than 1% increase over the month of October. Just kind of peeling back the layers there. A couple of really good things that we saw in November is one, we saw the labor force participation of women increase quite a bit. So a lot more women were going back to work, and we saw an increase in part-time work in particular. And so that was a really good news story. The other thing that was great is we actually saw a decrease in that long-term unemployment rate. So we talked previously, Mario, about there are a whole lot of folks in Alberta who have been unemployed for more than a year, which is a serious concern, right? And so we finally saw a drop in that number this month. So another really good thing there. That said, I will just say that we have not seen a full recovery. And the reason that I do not think that we've seen a full recovery is if we look at the percentage of the population who's actually working now versus pre-pandemic, we're still about 1 percentage point short of where we were. And especially labor force participation is also down about 1 percentage point. So still not fully recovered in my opinion, but still some really encouraging numbers nonetheless.
So when we look at Calgary and the Calgary region, I know that the statistics are kind of a little wonky when it comes to the more, when you get down to the census metropolitan areas. But the numbers that Stats Canada put out were 600 jobs up in the month, 11,200 jobs year over year gained. Unemployment rate actually increased to 8.1% from 8% the previous month. What do those numbers tell you about what's happening in Calgary and area?
Yeah, so actually the data that I was recently looking at on the city level, maybe this is a different data set, actually saw a bit of a decrease in the unemployment rate across regions. So I thought that was really encouraging to know that this improvement in the labor force is not just specific to certain parts of Alberta, but actually seems to be really broad-based. So yeah, I think that's an encouraging sign.
Okay. So let me ask you, when we look at unemployment rates, Calgary hovering around that 8% mark, Alberta just under around that 8% mark, and then the rest of Canada down at 6%. Why are we still out here with such a higher unemployment rate than say the national average?
Yeah, so I think Alberta in particular is seeing a higher unemployment rate because we have to remember we also were seeing a higher unemployment rate even before the pandemic. So I think that's one thing to remember when we talk about economic recovery from COVID. Really for Alberta, it's not just about recovery from COVID, it's about recovery from the recession that we were sort of facing prior to that, we already had unemployment rates of about 7.5% at the provincial level, right? And so just kind of comparing to other provinces, that's really too high, and that's not a healthy number. So I think for Alberta, it's really thinking even just beyond the pandemic impact of how do we really get back on our feet again.
So, as we look into the end of the year, we're into the last month and into, say, 2022, what do you guys expect to see, and more specifically about Calgary and Alberta, what do you expect to see in the labor markets as we move forward?
Yeah, so I think three things to watch. One is the Omicron variant, which is very top of mind right now, right? Just knowing and seeing what is going to be the impact of that. Overall, right now, I'm pretty optimistic that hopefully this will not, be an issue as far as our vaccine's effectiveness, but that's something to watch. The other big thing is labor shortages. So kind of on the encouraging side, we're seeing that 90% of our businesses are seeing an uptick in sales, and about 3/4 of them are planning to hire, right? So those are very good signs. However, about the same number, about 3/4 of our businesses are also saying that, hey, we're having trouble finding the workers that we need. So I think that's going to be something to watch, and that's something that we're seeing globally, but I think even more so in Alberta because of, I think there's an underlying skills mismatch of the skills that folks who are unemployed have versus the skills that businesses are looking for. And so I think that's going to be our number one challenge in Alberta to get right over the next year.
And of course, I guess you don't have labor. It cuts back on your productivity as a business, which impacts the overall economy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think probably the worst situation to be in would be to not need workers because we don't have sales, but instead we're in the situation of we have sales, we need workers. And so it's just a question of how do we ensure that folks who are looking for work have the skills that businesses need, and maybe getting a little bit creative about how we make those matches.
Yeah, and everything I've seen, Alicia, lately, whether it's the Conference Board of Canada, whether it's ATB Financial or RBC, are all painting a fairly nice picture for Alberta's economy going forward in the next, not only the next year, but also the next 2, maybe 3 years. Did you get a sense that we're on the rebound?
Oh, I definitely think we're on the rebound, but I think the thing we have to remember is we're definitely digging our way out of a deeper hole, thinking about last year and just the really heavy impact of oil prices on top of the other COVID impacts that other provinces were feeling. So we've got a longer way to go, but I do feel like we've got a lot of momentum going right now, and we just need to ensure that we carry that forward for the next, hopefully couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thanks, Alicia, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that was Alicia Planincic, who is the economist with the Business Council of Alberta. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.